"Do you know who my boyfriend is?" said Samantha Bracksieck while being arrested for DUI on the evening of February the 25th of 2020. At the time, Bracksieck was the girlfriend of New York Yankees star Aaron Judge. According to a police report, she was driving without her headlights near Hayden and Indian School Roads in Scottsdale, Arizona. Local police spotted her vehicle and followed her, signaling for her to pull over several times. Eventually, Bracksieck finally pulled over and she was placed under arrest, all the while repeatedly telling the officer her boyfriend's name, as if that would or should make a difference. After she was put in the back of the police cruiser, she claimed that her boyfriend was in the spotlight in the New York media and that her getting arrested was going to reflect badly on her. The police report indicated that she allegedly committed multiple traffic violations, including driving without headlights at night, failing to drive in a single lane, going 5 to 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, and having a slow reaction when yielding to an emergency vehicle signaling to pull over. In her initial breathalyzer test, her results showed a 0.125 blood alcohol concentration. When she was booked at the Scottsdale Police Department, she blew 0.169 and 0.181 respectively on 2 more breathalyzer tests. Bracksieck was charged with extreme driving under the influence in addition to the traffic violations. She reportedly took a deal with prosecutors and pleaded guilty to misdemeanor DUI in October of 2020. As part of the agreement, the charges against her were dropped. She was sentenced to 10 days behind bars, 9 of which were suspended, and she was given credit for 1 day she'd already served. Additionally, she was ordered to attend an alcohol abuse screening and pay over $2,000 in fines and fees. Number 9. Sharleen Diane O'Banion. On November the 17th of 2021, Montgomery County Jail Deputy Sharleen Diane O'Banion allegedly had intercourse with 28-year-old prisoner Jacob Parker. According to authorities, they became aware of the crime after O'Banion and Parker shared a recorded call on December the 17th, during which they discussed their intimate activity. When an internal investigation was conducted, O'Banion was questioned by detectives. She then confessed to having oral intercourse in the jail with Parker, in an area that was out of sight from cameras. Court documents indicated that the crime took place in a housing section inside the jail, which had no floor workers at the time. O'Banion claimed it happened only once. The 33-year-old was later terminated from work. She pleaded guilty to improper activity with a person in custody and was sentenced to 100 days behind bars. Number 8. David Carrick. English serial abuser and former police officer David Carrick was sentenced to life imprisonment after pleading guilty to several counts of abuse against 12 women that took place over a 17-year period. After serving in the British Army for a brief period in the 1990s, Carrick became a police officer with the Metropolitan Police in 2001. Between 2003 and 2020, Carrick often met women in Hertfordshire, England, using the online dating apps Badoo and Tinder. Eventually, he developed multiple abusive relationships with some of those women. Carrick allegedly degraded his victims through physical abuse with a belt, imprisonment in small spaces, urinating on them, and forcing himself upon them. In October of 2021, one of his victims reported to the police that he had indecently assaulted her during the course of their dating relationship. In 2020, the former girlfriend claimed that Carrick had threatened her, saying, "I can kill you without leaving any evidence." She also said that the man was charming in the beginning but later started putting her down. According to The Guardian, the woman had been coerced, intimidated, and controlled by Carrick while using his status, restraining her with his police-issue handcuffs and flaunting that he was a powerful man who guarded the Prime Minister. After the ex-girlfriend's report, Carrick was arrested that same month and suspended from police work. Many more women came forward, and he eventually pleaded guilty to 49 counts of abuse against women in December of 2022, and a month later pleaded guilty to 4 more related charges. During his sentencing at Southwark Crown Court on February the 6th of 2023, the 48-year-old received 36 life sentences with a minimum term of 30 years plus 239 days. The Metropolitan Police said that in the wake of Carrick's conviction, the force was re-examining past claims of domestic abuse or assault filed against Metropolitan officers and staff. Number 7. Brian Filipiak. In Rust Township, Michigan, local law enforcement received 2 reports of a truck that nearly hit several vehicles and almost ran off the road several times on November the 17th of 2016. According to a Montmorency County deputy, they spotted the pickup truck weaving along a road. When the deputy pulled over the vehicle, he learned that it was being driven by an off-duty officer named Brian Filipiak from the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. The deputy's body camera footage showed Filipiak trying to talk his way out of the arrest based on his position as a lieutenant. He went as far as to beg the deputy to let him go so that he could sleep it off. The deputy told him that he should be arrested because even police officers weren't above the law. Filipiak continued to plead, but after the deputy took out a taser gun, the lieutenant complied and was placed under arrest. Back at the station, Filipiak's breathalyzer tests registered blood alcohol levels of 0.28 and 0.27, which were 3 times the legal limit. 2 months later, Filipiak pleaded guilty to operating a vehicle while intoxicated. On March the 3rd of 2017, the 47-year-old was sentenced to 1-year probation, which included no drinking and frequent alcohol testing. He was also ordered to perform 40 hours of community service and to pay $1,266 in fines and costs. In the aftermath, Filipiak lost the title and pay of a lieutenant, but remained employed at the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office. However, the department said that he was no longer a sworn officer. Number 6. Andrea Griffiths. In December of 2019, British woman Andrea Griffiths resigned from her position as a police constable at the North Wales Police Headquarters in Colwyn Bay due to misconduct. According to North Wales Live, 44-year-old Griffiths submitted her resignation on the morning of a disciplinary hearing, saying she deeply regretted the one-time tryst she had with a vulnerable man she was supposed to be looking after. The man was reportedly an alleged victim of historic abuse. She admitted that the incident occurred on June the 29th of 2015 while she was on duty. The hearings panel determined that Griffiths was guilty of gross misconduct by her admission, noting that if she remained a serving officer, she would have been dismissed from the force. In the aftermath, she was placed on a banned list of former officers not allowed to work for the police again. Number 5. Hayley May Greenwood. Australian woman Hayley May Greenwood, who worked as a police officer in the Christies Beach suburb in southern Adelaide, was accused of corruption offences. The 25-year-old officer was arrested in August of 2015 following a probe by the police's anti-corruption branch and the Independent Commissioner Against Corruption. Greenwood was charged with abuse of public office, trafficking in a controlled drug, dishonestly dealing with property without consent, and possessing or using a dangerous item. She responded to her arrest by posting a YouTube video called Sky High, in which she rapped about being a superhero and wearing a disguise like Batman. She also resigned from the force. According to the newspaper The West Australian, Greenwood's prosecution was long and tortuous, delayed by her unfounded, baseless claims that she needed anonymity because she was the target of bikie gang retribution. Eventually, she admitted to the court that she'd been involved in dealing more than 0.23 ounces of methamphetamine and $1,000 cash while she was still employed as an officer. She was convicted of failing to act honestly as a public sector employee. In addition to having worked with the force and dealing drugs, Greenwood allegedly moonlighted as an escort at a Findon brothel. Some would call her a busy bee. Her lawyers confirmed this information while asking for leniency during the sentencing submissions in April of 2018. Later that month, Judge Julie McIntyre sentenced Greenwood to 53 months in prison with a non-parole period of 18 months. McIntyre told her that she was in a position that required her to uphold the law, not repeatedly disobey it. Number 4. Jill Curry and Brett Robinson, 2 former female prison workers who'd worked at the Washington County Jail, located in Hillsboro, Oregon, were jailed for releasing a maximum security inmate to have intercourse with him. Authorities said they received an anonymous tip on July the 8th of 2014 that civilian jail services technician Jill Curry, aged 38, was having an intimate relationship with 25-year-old inmate Jeng Lee Delgado Galban. Curry allegedly unlocked Delgado Galban's cell door and made sure he had a safe passage to a supply closet where the two would have intercourse. This happened at least 13 times in 2014. While law enforcement were investigating Curry, they discovered that 31-year-old Brett Robinson, another civilian service employee at the jail, had also been having a tryst with Delgado Galban. Investigators believed that Robinson had intercourse with the inmate at least 6 times. Apparently, both women were unaware they were involved with the same prisoner. In September, Robinson and Curry resigned after their shocking affairs came to light. They were accused of felony custodial misconduct and eventually pleaded guilty to the charge. During Curry's sentence hearing on March the 16th of 2015, the woman reportedly trembled and cried. As she apologized to her former co-workers and family, Judge Charles Bailey called out Curry's crocodile tears, saying her hedonistic pleasures were more important to her than those whom she addressed in her apology. Ultimately, Bailey sentenced Curry to 4 years and 2 months behind bars. In June, Robinson was also sentenced and received a jail term of 3 years. On March the 3rd of 2016, Delgado Galban filed a lawsuit against Washington County, alleging, among other claims, that his 8th Amendment right had been violated by the coercive activities of his jailers, to which he purportedly did not consent to. The lawsuit was dismissed in 2017. Number 3. Kenneth Skeens. In July of 2023, the New Mexico Attorney General's office filed charges including unlawful arrest against a former Albuquerque police officer. The former officer, 28-year-old Kenneth Skeens, reportedly played a role in the unlawful arrest of a person with disabilities in August of 2022. The victim was struggling to complete a purchase at a retail store on Paseo del Norte Boulevard in Albuquerque. Police body camera footage revealed that Skeens dragged the victim from the store by his arm and placed him on the ground outside the store. When the man refused to give his name, Skeens told 2 other responding officers to put him in handcuffs. As he was cuffed, he screamed out and tried to call 911. Apparently, he was confused about whether the officers were real police or not. The officers then forcefully took the phone from the man while pressing down on him. According to Attorney General Raul Torres, rather than acting as a professional public servant, Skeens engaged in abusive and unlawful behavior. Torres added that the former officer's behavior undermined public safety and violated the peace officer's oath in the state of New Mexico. While Skeens, the primary officer in the incident, was charged with false imprisonment, it was unclear if the other 2 officers involved in the incident were also facing disciplinary action. Skeens was also charged with perjury, making a false report, and battery. Subsequent information indicated that he entered a not guilty plea on August the 7th of 2023. Today's topic was requested by Zenos SJ for Hero. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Pleasure P. On March the 5th of 2020, law enforcement were called to 18100 Northwest 2nd Avenue in Miami Gardens, Florida, after a disturbance at the Checkers drive-thru was reported. According to an arrest report, a Checkers employee told responding officers that a male customer had been yelling at her through the intercom system for several minutes before he pulled up to the window and continued to yell louder and become more disrespectful. The worker said that the man subsequently gave her $60 in exchange for his food, then pushed her in the chest with the food. When one of the responding officers approached the suspect, the man told him, "I'm Pleasure P," to which the officer responded, "I don't care who you are." The man was later identified as Marcus Ramon Cooper Sr., famously known as R&B singer Pleasure P from the hip-hop group Pretty Ricky. The 35-year-old singer confirmed to the police that he'd been involved in a verbal altercation with the employee, but said he didn't throw food at her. While Cooper spoke, he emitted a strong odor of alcohol, as the arrest report indicated. After the police investigated, evidence at the scene and witnesses' testimony reportedly corroborated the victim's claim. Cooper was arrested and booked into the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center on a charge of battery. He was released a few hours later after posting his $15,000 bail. In the immediate aftermath, Cooper posted on Instagram saying he was wrongfully arrested in the incident. He noted that his order had been wrong and the worker refused to refund him. We have When Imposters Go Wrong lined up after number 1. In case you want to watch a bit more, they will kill you today. Number 1. Jackson Jones. A teen from Tennessee was arrested in Oklahoma on New Year's Day of 2023 for allegedly abusing fake power by acting as a deputy and pulling cars over in Choctaw. The suspect, later identified as 19-year-old Jackson Jones, was reportedly dressed in a vest marked Sheriff, carrying handcuffs, knives, a flashlight, and wearing a duty belt. A witness said that Jones was parked in a driveway ready to pretend he was on the job. The witness added that the teen claimed to be an undercover Wellston police officer, an odd detail given the flashy police outfit he was donning. Jones allegedly pulled over cars by flashing his headlights. According to the Oklahoma County Sheriff's Office, when Jones was questioned by deputies, he insisted that he worked for the Campbell County Jail and said he had just left work. However, the jail administrator in Campbell County said that Jones no longer worked for the jail and couldn't be rehired. After impersonating an officer in their jurisdiction, deputies also found 5 bottles of Mike's Hard Lemonade in the vehicle, 2 of which were empty, with a third bottle being half empty. The WBIR reported that Jones was arrested on charges of impersonating a police officer and having an open container in his car. He was booked into the Oklahoma County Jail on a $5,000 bond. Number 7. Kirill Belorusov. French film producer Laureline Garcia Berthaud was reported missing on March the 5th of 2019 after she'd failed to show up for work at the PR firm Golling, where she was an executive assistant. In the days leading up to her disappearance, several of her friends reportedly received text messages sent from her phone, the nature of which they would later describe as strange and confusing. The text indicated that Garcia Berthaud had gone on a shopping spree with her ex-boyfriend, Kirill Belorusov, who'd allegedly offered to purchase her a new home. The producer's friends were surprised, considering their knowledge of the latest developments in the former couple's relationship. Belorusov, an aspiring stuntman, had been emotionally abusive towards Garcia Berthaud for months prior to the messages being sent, and he also reportedly owed her thousands of dollars. The day after she'd been reported missing, Garcia Berthaud's body was found buried in a shallow grave in the garden of her Kew apartment. Investigators identified Belorusov as the likely perpetrator of her murder, as he'd been captured on CCTV footage at her flat. He'd also been spotted buying a series of items including trash bags, duct tape, and an axe, which the authorities concluded was part of a kit he would later use to kill Garcia Berthaud and clean up the scene. Following an investigation, it was determined that Belorusov had won back his ex-girlfriend's sympathies by faking a cancer diagnosis. He then spent a couple of days with the woman after unfoundedly promising to buy her a new home. Garcia Berthaud eventually discovered his various lies and presumably confronted him. At that point, Belorusov strangled her to death with a cable which reportedly took over 4 minutes. Once she was dead, Belorusov bound her arms behind her back, wrapped trash bags around her body, and discarded it in the garden. Afterwards, he sent text messages from her phone to some of her friends before fleeing to Estonia. He was eventually tracked down, arrested, and extradited back to the UK, where he was ultimately convicted of the murder and sentenced to life in prison. Number 6. Christian Gerhartsreiter. In the late 1970s, German teenager Christian Gerhartsreiter befriended an American couple who were traveling in West Germany. He would later use their names to obtain permission to enter the United States, falsely claiming that they'd invited him to stay with them at their California home. By 1979, Gerhartsreiter had settled in Berlin, Connecticut, where he was living with the family of author Edward Savio. Over the course of the next several years, Gerhartsreiter used a multitude of aliases as he traveled across the country, pretending at various times to be an actor, a physicist, a ship's captain, and even an English aristocrat. In 1995, while living under the name Clark Rockefeller, he married a successful businesswoman named Sandra Boss, whom he'd reportedly convinced that he was a descendant of American oil tycoon John D. Rockefeller. Boss eventually filed for divorce from Gerhartsreiter, citing his secretive and controlling tendencies as reasons for their deteriorated relationship. She also hired a private investigator who would make the discovery that Gerhartsreiter was not in fact a member of the Rockefeller family. On August 2nd of 2008, The imposter was arrested for having abducted his daughter while she was visiting him. Following his criminal conviction, he was sentenced to 4 to 5 years in prison. By the spring of 2009, investigators had identified Gerhartsreiter as a person of interest in the 1985 murder of Jonathan Sohus. He'd previously been a tenant in a guest house owned by Sohus' mother, and it was ultimately determined that he'd bludgeoned the man to death before hiding his remains. Gerhartsreiter was convicted of first-degree murder in 2013 and subsequently sentenced to 27 years to life in prison, with credit for the 1 year he'd already served. Number 5. Mark Nye. In February of 2020, police officers in Surrey, England, pulled over a vehicle driven by a man who would subsequently identify himself as Connor. According to reports from the authorities, the suspect had been stopped while he was trying to dispose of a package containing illicit substances and a pair of cell phones. The police also reportedly found hundreds of business cards for McGregor Enterprises inside his vehicle. The man was identified as 34-year-old Mark Nye, and he was placed under investigation by local law enforcement, who later found a large amount of boric acid in his home. They also discovered hundreds of text messages on his phone that detailed his various dealings as a purveyor of illegal drugs throughout suburban London. It would later emerge that Nye had modeled his appearance after MMA fighter Conor McGregor and was using the celebrity's name and likeness to promote his criminal business. Nye ultimately pleaded guilty to possession with the intent to supply Class A drugs, and in April of 2021, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Number 4. Vincent Marks. An off-duty Assumption Parish Sheriff's deputy was involved in a near collision while traveling down Louisiana Highway 70 on June the 10th of 2021. Shortly thereafter, a vehicle moved closely behind the deputy and began flashing its headlights continuously. The officer eventually pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store, and the car that had been following him reportedly parked directly behind him, blocking in his vehicle. The driver of the second car approached the deputy and presented him a badge, allegedly represented himself as a police officer. The deputy, however, recognized the man from a domestic incident that had taken place in Pierre Part earlier in the year, and thus knew that he was not, in fact, a member of law enforcement. A subsequent investigation into the incident uncovered that the police impersonator was 27-year-old Vincent Marks, a Plaquemine resident. He was arrested and charged with felony false impersonation of a peace officer. He was booked into the Assumption Parish Jail and his bond was set at $10,000. Number 3. Heather Garcia. On August the 31st of 2019, law enforcement officials in Farmington, Utah, pulled over a silver BMW upon noticing that it didn't have a license plate. The driver of the vehicle claimed not to have any form of identification with her, reportedly telling the officers that her name was Mercedes and that she was born in 1998. The police performed a search of her car, at which point they found drug paraphernalia and a white, powdery substance inside. The officers then discovered an ID card in the driver's purse and were able to identify her as 38-year-old Heather Garcia, which didn't correspond to the name she'd initially given them. It emerged that she'd actually provided the deputies with her daughter's identity. A preliminary records check indicated that she had multiple outstanding arrest warrants in Davis County. Garcia was consequently taken into custody and detained on several drug-related charges, as well as charges of driving with a revoked license and offering false personal information to a police officer. Number 2. Anna Sorokin. In the summer of 2013, a young woman named Anna Delvey traveled to New York City to attend the semi-annual New York Fashion Week. The 22-year-old was on location working as an intern for the French fashion magazine Purple. Delvey left the publication a short time later, but she decided to remain in New York to establish the Anna Delvey Foundation, a private members club and art organization. She reportedly struggled in her initial attempts to obtain funding for her idea from members of the city's social elite. A local club DJ named DJ LD would later tell investigators that Delvey had claimed she was a wealthy German heiress during a party at the luxury hotel called the Standard Highline. Over the next few years, Delvey reportedly relied on the purported inheritance promised to her by her illustrious German heritage to make connections with prominent artists and entrepreneurs. Some of them agreed to help bring her vision for the Anna Delvey Foundation to fruition, She organized expensive dinner parties and moved from one boutique hotel to the next, constantly avoiding paying her bills by promising wire transfers that never materialized. Eventually, on October the 13th of 2017, Delvey was arrested in Los Angeles County, California. It emerged that Delvey's real name was actually Anna Sorokin, and that her claims of being the heiress to a large fortune had been entirely fabricated. From 2013 to 2017, Sorokin reportedly stole a total of $275,000 from financial institutions, banks, hotels, and many of her acquaintances by forging bank statements and neglecting to pay off the debts she accrued. In May of 2019, she was sentenced to 4 to 12 years in prison after being found guilty of 8 charges, including second-degree grand larceny. Sorokin was released on parole in February of 2021, but was ultimately taken back into custody by Immigration and Customs Enforcement for allegedly overstaying her visa. Her case inspired a Netflix television series entitled Inventing Anna that was released in February of 2022. It centered on Sorokin's elaborate fraud and was reportedly the most watched program on the streaming service during the first week of its release. Number 1. Shanna Golyar. Starting in 2012, Nebraska man Dave Cooper began receiving an incessant stream of emails and text messages from his ex-girlfriend, whom he'd only dated for a couple of weeks. The harassment, which began shortly after the end of Cooper's relationship with 37-year-old Carrie Farver, continued for the next 3 years. Throughout that period of time, Cooper was sent tens of thousands of messages. The man reportedly changed his cell phone number several times, but Farver always managed to obtain his new contact information and thus resume her unwanted communications. In a televised interview with ABC, Cooper recounted how he'd once received a chilling message from his stalker that detailed the exact position he was in on the lazy boy chair in his living room. Detectives uncovered that there were also threatening messages sent from Farver's social media account to another one of Cooper's ex-girlfriends, Shanna Golyar. The situation abruptly turned violent when the latter was allegedly assaulted by Cooper's crazed former partner. Golyar's house was vandalized and set on fire, and she suffered a gunshot wound to the leg. The authorities soon became suspicious of Golyar after detecting a number of inconsistencies in the story she'd given to the police during her interviews. Upon investigating the matter further, the authorities built a case against Golyar, who, in a dramatic twist of events, was identified as Cooper's true stalker. The woman was revealed to have perpetrated the damage to her property herself before shooting her own leg in an attempt to portray herself as a victim. Body parts were found in her possession that investigators were able to link to Farver, whom they determined to have been murdered on November the 13th of 2012, the last day she'd been seen alive. Golyar had reportedly set her murderous plan into motion after growing jealous of Cooper's relationship with Farver. She impersonated a woman after killing her and began relentlessly tormenting her ex. In 2017, the scorned lover-turned-murderer was sentenced to life in prison, plus an additional 18 to 20 years for second-degree arson. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be a powerful politician without money or be a rich individual without any power at all? Let us know in the comments section below.